Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing and a brand new installment of Council of the Ones Babylon 5 review. And hope you all are having a wonderful Friday. Hope you all have had hopefully a relatively peaceful week. And glad to be back with you all once again as we continue our review of Season 5 of Babylon 5. And today we're going to be covering the episode Wheel of Fire. And with me, as always, you know him, you love him. He's Irish, Mountains of Elysium.
And
And
crazy.
yes, you have to be a little crazy to be on this channel because we get a little wacky up in here. So hope
Well, to the
everybody's
chat,
having.
you don't have to be crazy, but it helps.
Yes, that's true too. So, and unfortunately, several members of the council are otherwise disposed. They're dealing with trade disputes, they're dealing with border wars, they're dealing with all sorts of nonsense. So unfortunately, they won't be with us today. But we're here, and you're here, so all is well. So, but with all that being said, make sure you smash that like button, share this out with all your friends who are fans of good sci fi, not crappy sci fi, not mediocre sci fi, but great sci fi. And of course, Babylon 5 is indeed great sci fi. So, but with that being said, Elysium, my friend, it's been a week.
Yes, it's been
How have you
crazy. Joined
been?
the gym and feeling every bit of my years. I realize I'm not 23
Aren't we
anymore.
all? So,
And
and
greetings
to
to
everybody,
Colin.
yeah, and to everybody in the chat, whether you're lurking or otherwise, it's good to see Archer Colin. Good to see you, buddy, as always. Thank you for being here. So, of course, as always, Fiona Wolf, being the dutiful council member that she has recorded a short little video for us to listen to that gives her thoughts on this episode. So I'm going to pull that up, cue it up, and we will give it a listen. So, Council Member Fiona Wolf, here in just a minute. My dear, the floor will be yours. So bear with me for just a second, if you would be
Yes.
ever so kind, ladies and germs.
And Fiona's link is in the chat, so if you please subscribe to her channel and help her out. And also
Yes.
subscribe to the ambassador. We're almost to 500. Let's get him there quick.
Yes. And there will be indeed much rejoicing. Yay!
Yay!
Yay! So, all right. Fiona, my dear, take it away.
In the middle of a meeting because, oh, look, there's a baby on board. I mean, honestly. Ah, yes, the Wheel of Fire. In this episode, we get to see Delenn faint in the middle of a meeting because, oh, look, there's a baby on board. I mean, honestly, Sheridan's expression pretty much says it all with that point. And it's like, he's going to be a happy dad. Yeah, happy dad. And of course, this episode also has one of my favorite quotes. You cannot harm me. You cannot stop someone who's been touched by Vorlons. And then, Sheridan holds the PPG to her head. You're not the only one that's been touched by the Vorlons. Yes. Ah, good old quotes. You gotta love it. There's so many good things about this episode, but let's do a little bit of a rewind to the beginning. First, Jakar and his followers. Man, he's right on the money when he says Londo Mollari is probably the most isolated man in the universe right now. Yes, he has all the power of being the emperor, but that power came at a cost. And now the gilded cage is strangling him. Lovely. And, much to his surprise and I guess a little bit of horror, it's like him going to Centauri Prime and, miraculously getting out of there even after the bombardment has made his popularity grow. So I'm so sorry, Jakar. They're basically going to just see you as a symbol and not just everything underneath that symbol. Oh, and boy. I personally think that Franklin's talk with Jakar really does help him put everything into perspective, at least somewhat, Because right now Jakar himself is at a crossroads. Like his homeworld wants him to be like a priest king, and he's like, I don't want any of that. I just wanted people to learn from my book and not put me on a pedestal. But put him on a pedestal they did. And now most of Narn wants him to be either, the priest king or the king maker for other Narns. And it's just like, oh my goodness. But yeah, I do like the question that Franklin does propose. Franklin says, can God create a rock so big that even he can't lift it? So yeah, it's a good question to ponder. It's like, how much of that rock should Jakar really lift for his people when all he's really trying to do is teach them how to lift for themselves, in a way. And comes to the point where Garibaldi's whole alcoholism is pretty much run its big course. Everybody knows that he's not at his top game, so Sheridan puts him kind of like on administrative leave. And, it's needed because Garibaldi really does need to sober himself up and put stuff in perspective. Luckily for him, in the next couple episodes, he will get a bigger new purpose with, helping Lise run Eggers Industries, because he knows that those kinds of people would run roughshod over, his main squeeze. So, there is a light at the end of Garibaldi's tunnel. And then also continuing on in the Psy-Corp trilogy. Oh boy. Putting a couple of vampires to sleep. Yeah. And of course, you come to one of the bigger things of this episode, Leta Alexander versus literally everyone. I swear, most times Leta can't even catch a break. And to quote this down below, you have the idea of, well, what could make her turn like this? And of course, the reply, well, let's see. She was adjusted by the Vorlons, dumped by the Vorlons, used as a weapon, quit the Corps, lost the only man she ever loved, and dedicated herself to finishing his work. Pick one or all the above, and let's face it, she's pissed. Yes, Leta Alexander, of all the ensemble characters, maybe besides Londo, is in the most dire of straits right now. Granted, she kind of controlled what kind of straits she was in a little bit more, I think, but it also ties into the fact that she'll be someone that Garibaldi can kind of, I wouldn't say use, but they would have a healthy interest in supporting each other to take down Bester and his beloved Psy-Corp. So, there's that opening that will be created a little bit later in the episode. Because Garibaldi sees what she can do, so they basically have under the table kind of talk, because they know they can help each other. And besides, Leta can actually remove the blocks on Garibaldi. She just chooses not to because that's a useful lever to where, like, Garibaldi's going to control Edgar Industries and that he's going to have resources. Me and my associates, and I use that as a kind of a pun. Well, they're going to get to use a little bit of Mr. Garibaldi's resources a little bit later on the line. But the big reason why Leta's on the radar right now is because she's already started doing bombing runs back on Earth on Psy-Corp related headquarters or buildings or adjacent operations with the lovely words, "Remember Byron," plastered everywhere. I wonder who that could be. And of course, even though this is another quote, like, this episode has a lot of quotable material. Yes. The Vorlons used telepaths as weapons during the Shadow War, but what no one stopped to consider was that in a war you have a certain number of small weapons, a certain number of medium-sized weapons, and one or two big ones. The kind of weapons you drop when you're all out of small weapons and the medium weapons and you've got nothing left to use. And Garibaldi's like, someone like that would be the telepathic equivalent of a thermonuclear device, a doomsday weapon. And Leta's just smiling the whole time. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Garibaldi. And yes, the Vorlons did make her into like the super ginormous sized telepathic weapon to end all telepathic weapons in terms of, non-Vorlon persuasion. And probably part of the reason of that being was the third space threat. Because, if you remember back with third space, the Vorlon entity within Leta, or the ancestral memory, was like, yeah, that was the first of many mistakes. So many mistakes. Oh no. So, yes, this whole entire episode is a particular wheel of fire for many characters, not just Londo. I suppose I'll again round out my commentary for this bit of this episode is, yes, the Lynn and her pregnancy. And another favorite quote here, Sheridan, Delenn, and Franklin are all in the room, and Sheridan starts off, I tell you, the next person who acts irrationally, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. And here comes Delenn storming in. Bastards! Did she just? And Franklin's like, yeah, she did. And then Sheridan's like, I'll get the gun. Because, they're like, wow, Delenn just came in cursing. Because she's usually the most serene of everybody. But still, I reiterate, I do love that kind of shit-eating grin that was on Sheridan's face when it's like, I'm going to be a papa. And they're in the bed, and she's like, it's almost like you've never seen me before. It's like, I'm just pregnant. Yeah, that's adorable. That's adorable, people. So you have a good evening, and hope the rest of the ambassador will have a good time. Unfortunately for me, some of my recordings will be a little bit further into the future for the next couple of Fridays, because our truck day got changed to Friday until the next big holiday. So I might be basically having messages from the room for the next couple episodes. We shall see. Have a good evening, everybody.
As always, folks, if you are not subscribed to Councilmember Fiona Wolf's channel, Elysium, being the dutiful soul that he is, has put the link to her channel in the chat. So go over, check that out. And if you already subscribed, but you know some people that would like her particular type of content and would love to support somebody like her, who does a lot of her own world building, does a lot of writing, and so on.
She's very unique, to say the least.
Yes. And call him late, but never call him late for dinner. Council member Zod Rider. Zod, it's good to see you, buddy. I know you got here a little bit late.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys. Good to be here.
Good
for this monumental episode. I just happened to hear, when Fiona said that she's going to be further in the future with her messages, and there's not that many episodes left of the series. We're coming down to the wire here, so
yeah, we're getting towards the end. So,
but we do have movies. So
yeah, we're going to be doing, for those of you that may have missed those announcements, before we wrap up season 5, before we do Sleeping in Light, we're going to do a couple of back-to-back watch-alongs for River of Souls and Call to Arms. And then, of course, we will wrap up and everything season 5 before we do go into Crusade and everything, and wrap up season 5 with a bang. So, Zod, aside from what Fiona brought up in her video and everything, your thoughts on the Wheel of Fire?
She covered it very thoroughly, as she always does, and I have to agree with a lot of what she said. One of my all-time favorite quotes from Babylon 5, period, is when Sheridan comes out and says, "You're not the only one who's been touched by the Vorlons." I love that line. I love the way it's depicted. I love the awesomeness of Sheridan at that very moment when he confronts Leta. It's beautiful. It's a fantastic scene, and it's one of the crown jewels of the entire series.
And he knew what was coming, because you could see Lockley and Zach were there to apprehend. Yep. And where Sheridan, he said he'd be here. He knew something was going down, and to see how powerful Leta had become. That was scary.
Yeah, we've gotten glimpses of what Leta could potentially do throughout this series, particularly when she came back as Kosh's attaché. But in this episode, we really get I think, a pretty good depiction of just how the next level telepath, just how truly powerful Leta is. I mean, it's frightening, but it's also kind of cool. I mean, she is almost like the sci-fi equivalent of Professor Charles Francis Xavier, PhD, Professor X from the X-Men franchise, because he could go that far with his abilities when we've seen it in the various movies and other media and everything throughout the years. But in sci-fi terms, Leta is potentially the most powerful telepathic character ever put on screen. But as interesting as that whole subplot is, and believe me, it is. Jakar's predicament is rather intriguing. I won't lie, because here's a man who quite literally has all the power a person could ever want, but he doesn't want power. He doesn't want position. He doesn't want acclaim. He doesn't want all these grand things that most of us would just absolutely swoon over. Instead, he's like, I don't want the crown. I don't want all of this that my people want to give me. He's almost like, and y'all can disagree with me on this comparison, but Jakar is almost like Julius Caesar. Caesar was presented the crown to Rome, to the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic, and 3 times he denied it. And how many times has Jakar been offered a crown or a role of leadership or something along those lines, and he denied it?
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting is how he parallels Londo.
Yes.
Londo also has that power, but Jakar is able to walk away. But Londo had that keeper. And I know when you look back over the series, while Londo does crave power, he does ask at some certain points, how can I avoid it? And Jakar is the lucky one, though what he's gone through, you would hardly call him that.
Well, it's... this is kind of, and Zod, this will be kind of in your wheelhouse. I did a video about a year or so ago. It was after I had watched BVS, and I did a deep dive on 3 characters in particular: Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne, and Lex Luthor. And I compared the fact that each one of these characters has access to different degrees of power, and how they exercise that power, I think, is rather interesting. And if you look at what Straczynski did with the characters of Jakar and Londo, these are 2 characters who, one gets all the power, but he has no choices, and now he is quite literally trapped by his lust or his race for power. And the other one has made all the right decisions, and people have tried to foist power onto him, and yet he denies it. That to me is fascinating.
Power corrupts,
Just like with
which is why he doesn't want, which is why Jakar is so conflicted and doesn't really want this power and this responsibility. Jakar doesn't want to be corrupted. Londo was corrupted a long time ago, and now Londo has no choice. So
yeah, and I'll bring up Colin's comment here real quick. To be fair, while I do see the comparison, I suspect Caesar was to some degree saying what was expected, whereas Jakar genuinely means that. That's not a bad counterpoint, Colin. I can't say I necessarily disagree with that. The interesting thing within this episode too is the fact that Jakar decides that the best thing for him to do is leave. Not so much. I mean, he is doing it, I think, in part to alleviate a lot of the headaches for the station because of what his government has said in regards to Jakar's presence on the station, that they will not allow any ships from their part of space to come in. And that's what causes Delenn to have her outburst and, unfortunately, to collapse. Not thankfully, she came out of it fine. But Jakar, in a lot of ways, he mirrors... I'm trying to figure out how to frame this. He mirrors a reluctant religious figure. Or perhaps maybe not reluctant, but more so a religious figure that doesn't want the power and the acclaim and all like that. He wants to be inspirational. He wants to inspire people to think for themselves. He wants people to learn to live. And I don't necessarily dislike this phrase, but at times it can sound a little cliche. But he wants them to live their best life. He wants to be an inspiration, but he doesn't want to be a paragon. He doesn't want to be something that's upheld. He doesn't want to be what they make him into be and Colin brought it up very nicely a few minutes ago and everything. I'll try and find that. There it is. Hold on. There it is. Right there. Interesting that they apparently decided to have Jakar's statue made to look old, and I can't pronounce that word, Colin. Can either one of you?
Vertigrized. But
Vertigrized.
what it means, I am not sure.
I'm not even sure
Colin's
myself.
far more intelligent than...
Yeah. Well, maybe hang on just a minute. Maybe the missus knows.
So I was, as ambassadors checking things there, I was surprised that Delenn was descended from sailors. Coming in swearing like that, she definitely knew how to use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's... But would you say that that's more of like the being around all of these humans who swear and stuff like this, more of people essentially rubbing off on her at this point? Because she's always around these people, always in these situations with these people, and she's just
agreed.
And so she's kind of, letting herself go out of sheer frustration.
I think so, but she has sworn in the past where
yes,
like when she or when she went after the humans during the Minbari War, and when Dukat was killed.
Yes.
She was very unhinged.
Yeah. And Colin, thank you for breaking that down for us, because I have never even heard that term before in my life. So thank you, bud. Appreciate it. And to answer your question, I have heard of the author Terry Pratchett, but I have never read the book. So I'll definitely have to put that on the reading list at some point. So, but it's it's interesting to me that throughout this series, and in particular with Jakar, but not only Jakar, but so many other characters, they have these opportunities, or they are presented these opportunities, whether by chance or by design, to have positions of these positions of power and acclaim, and oftentimes they decline it when they are in fact the right people that should have those positions. And meanwhile, you have somebody like Londo who isn't necessarily we would not regard him as a wholly unredeemable or even a bad person or a bad individual, but he makes decisions and he gets involved in liaisons with other individuals that we would consider less than reputable.
So it's kind of like you're not. I love it because it's like you're not trying to put him as like a guilt by association, but by pointing out that his associations are so bad that it essentially does reflect on him a little bit. It's sort of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also to the chat, Bureau31, Bureau, it is good to see you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in, and thank you for the further clarification on that term. Again, Colin, I have heard of this world, but I have never had the opportunity to read it. Let's see. Actually, Stargate is probably a reasonable place to start. Small Gods, because it's a standalone. The main character is a reluctant prophet, kind of like Paul Atreides from the Dune universe.
There you go.
So,
in some ways, I was about to say that Jakar is like if Moses was an atheist. He too was a reluctant prophet, didn't want to had leadership trust on him, and was basically the basis for 3 of the world's greatest religions.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, and even if you look further out, you've got a character, like I mentioned before, you've got a character like Leta Alexander, who actually, she didn't want necessarily power, she just wanted answers. And she wanted to know more about the Vorlons and the Vorlons. And I must say this, I think it was unbeknownst to Kosh what the Vorlons actually did to her. I think Kosh may have asked for her to be altered, perhaps to be more, to facilitate more of his needs, but I don't think he was aware of just how much alteration was done to her in terms of her telepathic abilities. Because even Leta's telepathic abilities, I think, exceeds even a Vorlon's in a lot of ways. I mean, we see glimpses here and there of just how extensive a Vorlon's telepathic and telekinetic abilities really are. Granted, they're a being of pure energy, obviously, so they don't have the constraints of a corporeal form to limit their abilities. But I don't think Kosh, if he had known what they planned to do with her, he would have approved. Because granted, it wasn't necessarily during the first 2 seasons, but definitely the 3rd season. If you compare Kosh to Ukesh, there was a marked difference, obviously. And I think Kosh had a little more regard for humanity than the rest of the Vorlon race did.
I think Kosh was an ideal. And even Leta has much to go, because Jason Ironheart is many levels above Leta herself.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
actually, one thing that kind of popped into my mind was Leta said they make a few really big ones. I wonder, were there other Letas out there, other humans that were raised to her level that we just didn't see?
Or maybe even
Because
telepaths of different races.
possibly, because I know and I was delighted he got back. I tweeted JMS and asked him, in terms of the universe, where the human telepaths stand, and he said below Minbari and Centauri.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think there could be there could have been other races, other telepaths from other races uplifted to her level or even beyond.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, a Minbari telepath or even a Centauri telepath would probably just be base, if you put it at a baseline, would be incrementally more powerful than a human telepath, even though, let's say you put maybe a P12 in terms of like a Minbari telepath next to a Psy-Corp, I would say the Minbari is going to be stronger. Because let's be honest here. During the beginning of season 4, or maybe it's season 3, it's been a little bit since I've watched the episode. When Bester comes to the station, it's before they decide to go rogue and go ahead and stand against Clark. They bring in several Minbari telepaths to use them as shields, and the Minbari telepaths are able to pretty easily keep Bester out. So either those Minbari telepaths, either collectively or individually, were able to keep out one P12 human Psy-Corp. That's no small thing.
I wonder how much of it is the idea of nature or nurture. The
That's true too.
humans have only been getting, let's say, uplifted for, I believe, is it 100 years or 200 years in this in the universe?
Yeah, somewhere
But
along there.
humans have made it. It's much more militant and fascistic, where the Minbari telepaths are honored and revered, so they're able to develop their skills without the animosity or malice or pressure from society. They're all telepaths are able to develop. So I wonder how much of it is nurture. And maybe that's why humans and Minbari in the million years get to become first ones.
Yeah, yeah. Humans are essentially the problem.
Well, let's put it this way: Psy-Corp is essentially the problem, because once the Psy-Corp gets destroyed, I imagine the relationship between. I mean, I imagine there may still be some speed bumps here and there, but I imagine the relationship between normal humans and telepaths does get better, because while there probably is still mistrust, you don't have the
I don't know.
Psy-Corp there.
I don't know, Ambassador. I feel like human beings are just pig-headedly stupid, and essentially get so caught up in their own racisms and prejudices and things of that nature. It just, when you look at, from a societal level, I feel like it's gonna take about 200-300 years for humans to accept telepaths in a welcoming way, even after Psy-Corp is gone, because humans have a tendency to be veer more on the negative side when it comes to accepting things that they don't really understand, or accepting people who are different. And we're noticing, because we've been going through that all throughout human history. So it's
It's
essentially,
true.
it's hard to be optimistic in terms of what humanity is going to accept. But I see that Psy-Corp is essentially a big problem. Like, Psy-Corp is more of like the immediate issue, All that
Yeah,
other stuff, could come later. But yeah, the Psy-Corp itself is like the big bad to be eradicated at that point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you
yeah,
see the mustard seeds of change in Crusade, where you have
Sure.
the telepath and the captain, and they get on like friends? You can see how it could progress, but it's certainly not society wide. But like in the Bible, like greatest tree grew from the smallest of seeds. So I would have hope, but I do believe you're right, Saad, that in universe telepaths will take a long time.
Yeah,
but
it'd
it
be
will come.
closer to it. That's why I say it'd be about like maybe 300 years after the Psy-Corp is completely obliterated, because you would need time for telepaths to become as natural and as ordinary seeming as regular humans. Because again, wouldn't you consider a telepath to be, if it's a human telepath, it's essentially an evolved version of a regular human being. So an evolution is essentially a new fear. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take generations, basically. So yeah.
Well,
Franklin, sorry, Ambassador.
No, it's okay, Elysium. Go ahead, bud.
No, I think Franklin was right when he mentioned the in the episode where the Drazi who got hold of the shadow tech and were, like he said, these people, they didn't build it, they don't know its possibility, and they get hold of a weapon and are more than ready to use it, even though they don't know the consequences, they don't care about the consequences, and they could never build it themselves. Humans have been almost given the weapons without having evolved to a point of, like the Minbari, their society was open to telepaths because they have rituals, they have the ability to accept that change. Humans haven't evolved to that yet, but you can see that, again, the mustard seed. The people in the Babylon 5 universe have stopped apart from with telepaths, have stopped the prejudice towards religion, sexuality, races. You see people of all different races being prejudiced towards aliens, but working well together. That before, as we see in our world now, doesn't happen.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Well, and this is something I've been discussing as I've gone through the last couple of weeks doing the review series on the X-Men franchise, the X-Men films. And the opening monologue or voiceover by Xavier in X2 X-Men United is very telling, particularly anything from, if you look at it, if you put it in the context of the Babylon 5 universe. It is a well-known fact that humanity has a difficult time in sharing or being accepting. And you see this in one particular instance in that film when one of the X-Men, Bobby Drake, Iceman, is betrayed by his own brother and is pretty much just cast out or made the black sheep of his family by his own parents just because he's different. And it's interesting that if you look across the spectrum of the Babylon 5 universe, except for humanity, just about every other race regards their telepaths as equal. Different, but equal, and not cast out of normal society into this big black scary box known as Psy-Corp. I imagine that the Narns, when they had telepaths way back when, they were regarded with a degree of respect and they were treated as equal. They were not shunned from society. Obviously, this is true of the Minbari. I would imagine it's true of the Centauri to varying degrees. They don't seem to treat their telepaths badly. I don't know if the Drazi or the other members of the Alliance have telepaths, but we can assume more than likely that they do. And we don't hear, at least not in the show, and I don't know of any other media where the other races of the Alliance or the former League of Non-Aligned Worlds treat their telepaths badly. It's only humanity that we took all the telepaths, had them regulated, and had them shoved into this organization that's as corrupt and as dirty as they come.
Sorry, just replying. Colin has a really good comment there about that, how much of the Minbari culture was due to Sinclair.
Yeah, that is true too. But then again, how much of Minbari society was due to that what Sinclair thought knew and was brought in by Valen? Yeah, that's true, Colin. And you could imagine there was some trickle down, or maybe there was some cultural impact upon other races or anything, especially those that did trade or whatever, or had diplomatic relations with the with the other races. To answer your question, Beer 31, no, the Narn didn't exterminate their telepaths. The shadows destroyed them. And then the rest destroyed the majority of them, and the last of them were killed, and I think along with Shaquan, when him and the last of the Mindwalkers took on the shadows on their home world and ended up sacrificing their lives to drive the shadows from Narn. So that's the lore that we know from the B5 universe.
Yep, Colin was ahead of us.
Yeah, he was just a little bit. So, well, guys, let me ask you this: in terms of Garibaldi's situation, do you think he'll eventually? We obviously know from later on in the series or anything that he does end up in a better place. Do you think Sheridan did the right thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. He did.
Okay. Well, now here's a follow up. Do you think Sheridan assumed too much blame upon himself in regards to what happened with Garibaldi? The fact that he didn't pick up on the drinking, on the alcoholism? Or do you think Garibaldi was just that good at hiding it?
I think Sheridan had a lot on his plate and was relying on Garibaldi to do what Garibaldi does and to do the right thing and to be who he is. I think if Sheridan has to worry about everybody on that level, I think Sheridan would go nuts. You know, it's like there's certain things that if you're gonna rely on this person, you're gonna rely on this person because you know this person is good at what they do, and they're not, and you shouldn't have to chase after them. Now I understand, you know, being a friend and being close to a person and you know, being able to pick up on certain things, but to be honest, you know, Garibaldi had been struggling with this for quite a while, and I don't know if he necessarily was that good at hiding it. I think it's more or less just that he hit it when he had to, and again, Sheridan was just expecting Garibaldi to do his thing and this not to be something that Sheridan needed to worry about. So I mean, I don't know. I don't think that Sheridan necessarily, if there's anything Sheridan could have necessarily did better in that situation. Maybe had he picked up on it, something would have happened where he could have picked up on it. But I really don't think, when you look at the series and you look at that point where Sheridan is, I don't think he really would have. I mean, I can honestly say I don't think that if it were any of us, I don't think we would have either. Do you? I mean, really, it's kind of like,
He did say he felt it was maybe stress because he did mention
yeah.
you have been poor performance, you haven't been at your best. But I think Sheridan too sees in Garibaldi what Garibaldi doesn't see in himself. Garibaldi at half power is still better than most people. He is
That's
a
Yes,
true.
brilliant operator.
he's brilliant. Yeah, and
Mhm.
again, you rely on him to do his thing, and when for the most part he's doing it, but he's just a little bit stressed or has some high tension going on. I mean, because obviously, Garibaldi has his demons. They all do. Everybody knows that that everybody is going through
Mhm.
something. That's just the
Yes.
reality of it. So, for Sheridan to have to put a hand in figuring out the whole alcoholism thing, I just don't see it. I think it's the Sheridan line, "You're drunk," like you, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But
Well,
sorry, Ambassador.
no, go ahead, Elysium. You're fine, bud.
I wonder was Sheridan's pep talk where he did mention, yeah, your performance has been poor. Maybe you're right that he hadn't picked up on it until he looked back on the situation. He said Delenn spoke to him. And I wonder was that conversation the same conversation that Delenn had with Lanier where he
Mhm.
gave out his love to her and she gave him the way out. Sheridan is looking at Garibaldi and saying, you know what? This is not all on you. He's trying to help his friend,
Yep,
but still trying to be presidential, still trying to be he's still his boss and has to be.
exactly.
And that's that's the sign of a good leader. He's like, I can't let this go unanswered, but he's like, I'm not going to come down on you as hard as somebody else might, because of our relationship, although it's been tumultuous at times, and because of what happened between you and me. But he's like,
There's a
I'm not going to.
history.
Yeah.
There's a history. There's a love between these two gentlemen.
Mhm.
There's a mutual respect. There's a lot
Yes.
of things between them that and then and as tumultuous as it's been, Mountains of Elysium points out, there's yet some other things that happen later on down the line where it continues to be quite tumultuous even after this.
Yeah.
So it's essentially Sheridan handled this all so beautifully. And when you think about it overall, I don't think it was necessary. I mean, if it were anybody else that were in charge at that moment, rather than Sheridan, I believe even if it was solely say Lockley, just Lockley in power, period, and Sheridan wasn't there, I think there would have been a different conversation.
Maybe, but and I'm glad you that's because that's a good segue, Zod. Colin brought this up. The Garibaldi Lockley dynamic was very well done in this story, because you have a very powerful scene between the two of them where she opens up further about her own past and the fact that her father was an alcoholic, and
Yes.
the fact that she went down her own very destructive path, and we saw a little bit of that in the Day of the Dead episode with her friend. Oh, what was the name of the friend who visited her? I
I
can't
think it
remember now.
was, what was it, Zoe?
So
Might have been,
yeah.
yeah, it was Zoe. Yeah, it was Zoe. And we get a brief picture of what Lockley's life was and everything at that point in her life. And she's like, I can do one of two things. I could turn into what I hated, or I could try and help as many as I can. And she kind of did both for a while. And that's that says a lot about Lockley as a leader. She might have come down on Garibaldi and initially, but then she might have come to him afterwards and said, "Look, yeah, I lowered the boom on you," but she would be like, "Here's what I've had to deal with in my own life, not just me, but also my father, what he had to deal with." And maybe in that they might have been able to come to an understanding with one another, and maybe there would have been maybe some initial reconciliation between the two of them, and you have that very good scene and everything just before Lee shows up, and he's like, "I just want to say thank you." He's like, I appreciate what you told me, and I hear you, and he's like, he said very well. He's like, maybe that's why we butted heads so much when you first got here. We saw a bit of each other in the other person. So, and to the chat, Jacob Ironside. Jacob, always a good pleasure to see you, buddy. Appreciate you stopping in this afternoon. So, let's see. Okay. But Colin, yeah, I think he was. Yeah, he was in every season. He was in practically every single episode except for maybe one or two. So, yeah, Colin, I think you're right.
And
Yeah,
he's in some of the movies too.
Yeah, he was in. Well, now he wasn't in the beginning. I remember that much. But let's see. He
was in
wasn't
Call to Arms.
He was in Call to Arms. I'm pretty sure that he was. Wasn't he in River of Souls?
That's a movie I can't remember, so it will be interesting when we do the watch along.
Yeah, it'll be that. We'll have to wait.
Now, River of Souls is a little bit forgettable, but it's a Garibaldi movie.
Oh, okay, all right. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing those two because I've never actually watched River of Souls. The ones I have watched was, of course, in the beginning, The Gathering, Third Space, and I saw bits and pieces of Call to Arms, but I never got a chance to watch it all the way through. So that'll be an interesting watch for sure. So, well, guys, any other points in this episode that y'all want to hit upon? Anything that we might have glanced over or not hit?
I thought Leta Alexander was a bit overpowered.
Yeah, she was meant to be, but I get your point.
Just a bit, though. Yeah.
Yes, but I did like the act when mentioning there the negotiation she had with Garibaldi, that he can figure a way out of his trouble, and how we set up the telepath civil war, or the telepath war, in that conversation they had, that she just demolished the camera and they had that conversation, and both of them negotiated well. Even Garibaldi, in the position he was in, was still able to kind of pull one up on Leta.
Yeah.
And what I find funny is, if Leta hadn't kind of gone off the deep end, she would have seen that Garibaldi would have helped her regardless of those blocks. And she didn't need to hold that over him.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Colin, for bringing this up. I'll bring it up here. His showing on IMDb as 111 episodes, so there were several other actors who were not in everyone, so that may be from the credits rather than actual appearances. That's possible too, Colin. So, but either way, he did a bang-up job, and I can't wait to see who they cast to do his part for the reboot. I hope they get somebody equally as layered and just as good of an actor as Jerry Dole was, because they're gonna have kind of a tough act to follow, but in Straczynski we trust, as always. So, let's see. No, of course not, Alicia. Why would I care about that? Go ahead, by all means, put his link in the chat. While he may not formally be here, he will always have a place here, regardless. So, well, anyways, guys, if there is nothing else, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the afternoon or the evening. I want to thank Hounds of Elysium, Zod Rider, guys, great discussion as always. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Of course, thank you to Fiona Wolf for her contribution to the stream this afternoon. For those of you that catch us on the replay, make sure to leave your comments down below with anything that me and the fellows might have missed, or anything in regards to this episode. We will be taking next week off. I'll tell you guys once we wrap up and everything as to why. But we will be back the week after with another installment of the Council. So be sure to hit that notification once I post the link to that stream and everything. Do want to let y'all know I will also be live this weekend, everything tomorrow and Sunday. I will be doing my wrap up and discussion, or review and discussion of episode 3 of Kenobi, and we'll also be continuing my X-Men review series, so be sure to tune in for those and everything. I've already got the link or the stream for Kenobi set up. Just got to put together put together the link for X-Men. So, but you all have a great weekend. To all of you in the chat, thank you for being here this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Thank you for a very wonderful discussion. We look forward to these each and every week, and we're glad to have you all here just the same. So, but with all that being said, folks, we will see you all next time. And until next time, this is the Council of One saying, and 3, and 2, and 1. Zooty, zoot, 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 zoot.